So I'm going to show you guys how to do the line design plate then. This is the example that I have here. This is one of the ones that actually did disappear basically in the glaze. I tried to use nebula on the side and it kind of made the design come out of it. The design that was in there is basically this design, which I'm going to recreate for you guys again. So I made first hour and I'll be doing that one again. So to do this, you're going to start out with some clay. We are using pug clay for this, so we do need to wedge it. You should get used to wedging most of the time anyway, but when we do get the boxed clay in here, you actually don't need to wedge for these kind of projects for slab when it's coming out of the box. The reason is that we're getting it is not old clay at this point in time, and it's called pre-wedged clay. So the pre-wedged clay doesn't have any air bubbles in it, and it's kind of worked the clay together. Now if that sat for years, you would have to actually wedge it because the outside would have dried out more than the inside. But this will be fresh clay when it comes in. But we can wedge the clay. The wedging is basically just rocking it. You will get used to this. This is awkward to start out with. Basically what it is this hand is doing most of the motion sideways. This hand is just rolling it up and down. So up, push through with this hand, up, push through. What people make a mistake of is they try to push straight down and like go way too far, and then they pick it up and kind of sandwich it into it. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it just kind of keeps working forward, and basically you're going to see that it starts twisting along the way, and that makes it kind of work together on doing things. So once you get it together, you're going to actually make it into a ball. So just kind of hit it to get it to the right space. Don't have to do too much. I'm just going to flatten this out then a little bit. Pick it up and turn it over. That's just like if you've ever made cookies before, it spreads out easier if you flip it over every once in a while. So get it out a little bit and then you're going to be able to throw it out. So remember when I mentioned earlier this year that the particle board works better for doing the throwing of the clay on? Don't choose the ones that have the wood design in them. It sticks easier to that. So I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to throw it out. Now, the action should be coming towards you. You'll notice I have my leg against the table. That has to be there because this keeps trying to scoot this way. If you do it incorrect, and I'll show you what people do, they bring it up way too high, first of all, and try to go straight down and do this. What that does, and you'll see it on the second one here, first of all, if I would have been on a different type of board, and I'm going to go ahead since it did get pretty stuck there, I'm going to do it again just to show you what it basically does. It starts getting thicker in the center, it stays thicker in the center, and it thins out towards the edges, and that's not what you want it to do. You want it to get thinner as it goes, so you rock it forward, and you let it go at an angle, and your arm should actually go behind you. You shouldn't be trying to hit this down on there. You should just let it go at an angle. Don't go too far. People have a tendency to like doing this, so they end up going way, way too thin. This should still have some thickness to it, so that's pretty good right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this. This is about the right size for going down inside of here, and we need something to press down into it. So these square bats are in on the bat wheel in there. So I'm going to set this on here. There's a little bit of a lump here, so I'm going to go over just a little ways. I'm going to set this on here, make sure I have about a ½ inch around it everywhere, and just use this as a guide right now. I'm going to take my ruler. Remember the metal rulers, please, and not the plastic ones. They're for drawing. And I'm just going about a ½ inch extra. You can make it a little bit more if you want to, if you want a little bit bigger edge to it. But that gives me pretty good to work with around the outside of it. And take the scraps off. Typically the scraps I would keep on the board, but I'm going to set it next to it for right now because I have to flip the board over actually. So I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to flip it right now onto another board. You just have to sandwich it between. To take it off of there, I get the corner started, and I just kind of walk my fingers across it and lift up. And that works out. And I'm going to flip it onto something to press in. So it's kind of a double flip to start out with. This is just foam pieces that are actually in by the glazes, above the glazes in there. Just set that over top of it, and I'm going to flip it onto that one. I want to make sure that I put paper towels or something in between that will allow it to not stick to whatever you're working on. So it's best to have that or a plastic bag, one of the two. The nice thing about the paper towels is they don't leave the design basically behind that the paper towels do. Now I'm going to use this to press in, so I need to make sure it's kind of even on all sides. I'm going to press going around the sides. And this gives me my area to work on. Pull that out. That is where I'm going to do my designing. I did use this earlier, so you can trace around this really quick to figure out what you want to do. I did just pick things that I could pick up and press into it, so I've got a few things like this along the way that you can work with. I did mention that this is the one that you can roll in. Maybe on this one I'll roll towards the center here just a little bit to show you what that looks like. So it basically embosses the surface. So basically you get a little bit up in the air. You'll notice this is pretty floppy right now, and that's okay. I can push up the edges later on. I'm going to use, just put this, here, I'm going to use some WD-40 actually that's just on a bit of the foam in there. The WD-40 makes it so it won't stick to the clay as much. So I'm going to press that in and pull it back out. If you can't get a hold of it with your fingers, you can pick it up with a needle tool. That didn't quite go as far in as I wanted it to, so I'm going to do it one more time. Kind of press towards the center there a little bit. So, got that out of there. And then I'm going to put in a few squares coming around the outside. And like I said, I just picked a bunch of things that I could press in really quick, so it's up to you what you want to do. You can draw it in, you can carve it in, you can do all different kinds of things. So I've got those there. If you wanted to draw something in, I would highly recommend that you drag it on the surface. Now take your pencil down to a side and kind of drag it across. Don't go straight up and down because you end up with those kind of jagged edges on it. So the more that you can kind of, at a very, very low angle, drag, and then all it takes is usually your finger or one of the makeup sponges, which is right here. So you just get the makeup sponge wet, squish it out completely, and then you can run it across the surface, and you can see how it makes the ones that are kind of drug across a lot nicer, quicker. So if you're carving in that way, do that. This can take care of your edges. Make sure that you are taking care of all of your edges before, when it's still wet. If you leave it until it dries out, sometimes people want to use sandpaper. Sandpaper is banned from in here because of the dust, and the dust, like I've mentioned before, has silica dust in it, and if it gets up into the air and into your lungs, it does not come out. You guys are not around it long enough to really cause a problem, but I live in it every single day, so you're helping with my health and safety, please. And so get it all smoothed out now, especially after it's fired. Not only is it super difficult to do, but it also still has some silica dust in it, so we need to be very, very careful. Smooth all the edges. I'm not going to take time doing that. I would take quite a bit of time if I was doing this myself for a final product. I'm going to push up the edges just a little bit, and I could either flute them. If I was fluting them, I would probably start in the center here, kind of press the center up, and then I would come over next to it and kind of go half and half and kind of flute that way and work it up in the air. I'm going to straighten this back out and just push it up a little bit. And I can do that on all four sides. Be careful of those edges again. The edges you're going to have to kind of press together to get them to stay up. And if I wanted to kind of put something under it, I could crunch out some newspaper, kind of press under to hold it up in the air later on. Take your time, smooth this out, make it really, really cool and nice when you're done with it. Kind of crunch. If you had like just an edge you needed, you could just ball up the clay and, or the paper, newspaper and put under it. You can also use paper towel if it's something that's a more delicate area basically to work with. So a lot of time smoothing, a lot of time working with it. To flip this over and put your name on it, I'm going to flip this one really quick because this is super floppy. By the time you're done working on them, they'll be a little less. This one I made first hour, so I should be able to flip it a little easier. I'm going to put paper towel back in it again just to make sure that it doesn't get stuck to it or hurt. I'm going to flip it over, put your name on it. Please, again, make sure that it is your full name that you're putting into it. If you can't fit your last name, at least put your first name. If you only put initials, you make me have to think through everybody that I've ever taught pottery to before. So put your name in it. If you want, you can put feet. So the feet have two different kind of purposes to them. First purpose is that it kind of lifts it up off of the surface and makes it look more delicate and cool. Second purpose is so that you can actually glaze right down to the edge of it. If you didn't have any feet on here, you would have to stay up, I would say right about there, that you would have to stop in order to be able to make the glaze so it wouldn't run down and connect to the shelf and break apart later. So since I have this on here, I could even glaze the bottom of this, but I would usually probably just go down to the edge of the pottery piece. The feet are basically, all they are is just take a piece of clay. These are just rolled up. You can cut them out. You can make them as decorative as you want. I've seen people make actual feet before for them. Just kind of squish it out just a little bit and work with it. All you'd have to do to connect this to it is to slip and score it. So the scoring is scratching the surface, and then I'd scratch where it was going on there too. Put a little bit of water. We will actually have a slip bucket around here really soon, but for right now we just have that. I'm just going to stick it to the top of this. Just this one's not going to become reality. So this would be underneath it, but put it onto there. Don't just press it onto there, because right now I left air pockets down into there. Air pockets are worse than anything else, because air pockets, when gas heats up, it expands faster than a solid does. It will literally push it off of there if you do that. So what I need to do is get that to wiggle all down together and get that air pocket out of there. So I just kind of work it back and forth. That creates slip down in there. You can kind of feel when it actually connects to the clay and it's not just sliding on the surface. You can feel it kind of connect in. Then you know you're on there good. So if you do that, you might want to actually take either a bat or the board again and kind of press each of the feet down to make sure that they stay steady. Most of the time I don't do 4, I do 3, because 3 is a more stable stool. Basically, it won't tilt both ways. If you have 4, they have to be exactly even, otherwise they rock quite a bit. So either try 3, or if you do 4, make sure you press it down onto a board again and it won't rock all over the place.